Section 23 of the Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. The Poniard of Charlotte Corday by Clyde Broadwell as Francois de Vallient. Paris, March 16th, 1919. I shall assassinate Monsieur Clemenceau, Tiger of France. I do not wish to do it, but ever since my father, on his deathbed, gave me the poniard of Charlotte Corday, handed down in my family since it was secreted by my ancestor, who helped in her arrest, I have felt an inordinate desire to kill men in high places. I do not understand this obsession. My whole soul revolts against such a crime, but I am in the hands of a fate I cannot control. I am writing this diary to exculpate myself in the eyes of the world should I do this most foul murder upon a man whom I love and respect. Paris, March 20, 1919. I have seen him, Monsieur Clemenceau, and hate with the hate of the damned. Yet I know that in my innate soul I do not hate, but am impelled to the emotion by irrevocable decree. Perchance it is the curse on the dagger pronounced by Charlotte when she slew Marat in his bath. I do not know. God save me from this deed. Paris, March 23, 1919. Today I bought a dummy figure of life size, such as are used in windows of clothing shops to display garments as they would appear when donned by men. I spent 2 hours hollowing out the left breast of the dummy. This hollow I filled with a huge boneless ham, smoked until it was almost black. First I trimmed it to fit into the hollow, exactly as a carpenter might dovetail a joint of wood. Before I chose the ham as a medium, I had considered and discarded as impracticable such fillings as cement, plaster, or putty. Nor was beef acceptable. I chose the ham because it will last longer without putrefying. For 2 hours more I practiced thrusting Charlotte's poniard into this fleshy breast, having first covered it with cloth painted with lines to represent human ribs, and outlining behind the ribs the exact location of the heart. I wished to make sure of my aim. When I strike, Monsieur Clemenceau shall die. Paris, March 26, 1919. 40 times out of 45 I struck with unerring precision straight between the diagrammed rib marks into the heart of my dummy. But this is not sufficiently accurate. I must be more expert, letter perfect in my thrust at the heart. Strange, but even with all this thrusting, and despite my effort to polish the poniard blade, a spot remains upon it. It seems like a rust spot, but I surmise it is the blood of Marat, which dried into and remained on the weapon. Otherwise, it is as bright and keen, sharp-pointed and deadly as when it bit the heart of Corday's victim. Paris, March 29, 1919. Monsieur Clemenceau dies tomorrow. Today I struck true every time I thrust with the poniard. I have arranged with Monsieur Gaston Boudoir for an interview with the tiger. Little does he dream what awaits, and yet I wonder at my calm cruelty and deliberate preparation. I find myself hating myself for the dastardly thing I am about to do. It is the curse of Charlotte Corday on the poniard. It can be nothing else than this curse which drives me to do this foul deed. Etienne Desmortes frowned as he read these entries in his diary. He shook his head. "It is not enough," he muttered. "I must practice more with my dummy clothed. I had not thought of that." Desmortes closed his diary, rose from his desk and secreted the little book of memoirs in a closet built into the wall. From the closet he produced a coat somewhat the worse for wear. With this he went to the dummy standing in the corner near the window of his room. Without much difficulty he adjusted it on the form, then sniffed as an odor of decaying meat greeted his nostrils. "I must get another ham," he muttered with a grimace. "This one," he shrugged. Desmortes was a dapper little Frenchman, not more than 5 feet 5 inches tall, but every inch of him steely muscle. His brown eyes were more nearly black. The dainty mustache of an exquisite adorned his upper lip. His wavy hair of raven hue surmounted a high, fine forehead and a face almost spiritual in its delicacy. Etienne's small ears were set high. His teeth, which his lips had bared in grimacing, were in 2 perfectly aligned rows, which evidenced scrupulous use of a brush. His hands were small but strong. As he picked up the poniard, which had been Charlotte Corday's, and prepared to strike through the coat at the dummy's breast, the knuckles of his right hand were white with the tension of his powerful grip on its hilt. Stepping to one side, Desmortes lunged with the dagger. It sank deeply into the flesh of the ham. Etienne withdrew the blade and opened the coat. "Ah," he murmured, "perfect." In the painted cloth diagram was a fresh cut cleanly made between 2 picture ribs and into the heart. Etienne closed the coat and struck at it again and again from every possible angle, upward, downward, from left, from right, and obliquely. For each time he hit, he opened the coat to inspect the wound he had made in the diagram. It was a slow, tedious process, nor was it light labor. Etienne's brow was glistening with perspiration, and his hair was matted on his forehead. 40 true hits out of 41, he totaled ecstatically. "No need to delay longer. I needn't buy another ham either." Blithely he washed, then sprayed cologne in the air from an atomizer, so that the stench of decaying ham no longer was noticeable in the apartment. "No need for delay," he repeated. "Tomorrow I strike. Today, now, a stroll on the Champs." Etienne Desmortes carefully locked the door of his room, one of many in the Pension de Messieurs, whose front faced on the Rue de Croix de Guerre. Sauntering down a narrow corridor to a stairway, he descended 2 flights into a long hall leading to the exit of the big lodging house. His heart was light within him. A smile in his eyes, he ogled many a pretty girl as he strolled the Champs-Élysées. Many a sweet smile he received in return, for Etienne had a winning way which few women could resist. But his smiles were more from force of habit than from immediate desire to arrange an assignation. His hand must be steady. His purpose must not be disturbed by wild indulgences which might cause nervousness. Afterward, if he were successful and escaped, he could enjoy life as he would. No man looked less the assassin than did Etienne Desmortes, as he gaily promenaded, greeting with a smile every acquaintance and friend who chanced to cross his path. It was evident from their cordiality that he was a general favorite even among men. In a cafe he sat at a table and sipped absinthe disguised with red wine. For although a ban has been placed by France upon the sale of absinthe, the law is winked at and made a national mockery. Despite Etienne's determination to avoid whatever might unnerve his hand, the absinthe was so palatable and his mental strain was so great that one glass led to another, a 4th, ere he realized he must cease such madness on the eve of his great enterprise. Yet another glass he imbibed to steady himself as he argued in excuse. But this glass began to make Etienne feel exuberant. He was on the threshold of an achievement which would rid him forever of the curse on Charlotte's poniard. One stroke of its keen blade would end the haunting spell it had cast upon him. Clemenceau's blood must flow. That other fool who had tried to assassinate the premier with bullets had been careless. Evidently he had not practiced as had Etienne for the ordeal, else the task would not have been left for another who held no hate. But Desmortes did hate, for so he had written. But it was not a personal hate. It was a hate inspired by Charlotte Corday's Poniard. He dwelt upon this point insistently until his thoughts began to grow hazy from the effects of the absinthe. Etienne's step was unsteady as he wended homeward. Without undressing, he flung himself on his bed, and soon was snoring, prey to fitful dreams and horrid nightmares, which caused him to live through scenes yet to be enacted, and to voice wild thoughts in tones louder than the caution of consciousness would have permitted him to use. In the room next to Etienne's, Lucien de Vallée pressed an ear against the thin partition separating the two apartments. Lucien's face was full of horror as he listened to the ravings of Desmortes. "When I thrust, Monsieur Clemenceau dies," came Etienne's voice. "Unhappy Poniard, goad to ruin. I don't hate. Hate worse than fiends, devils, green, blinding glare. Poor tiger, I won't hurt you. Die, monster. Oh, guillotine!" Followed a wild shriek of delirium which made the listener shrink and shudder in pallid fear. Waiting to hear no more, Du Vallée rushed from his apartment and downstairs. In the hall he telephoned French Secret Service headquarters. Lucien informed the department that he had suspected Etienne contemplated crime from the moment he saw his fellow lodger in the pension receive the dummy figure into his apartment. Then he had heard the dull thuds of a dagger as it was wielded against the form by Etienne. This, followed by the maudlin talk, had caused him to notify the department to act. The voice on the other end of the wire thanked Du Vallée. A sharp click greeted Lucien as the Secret Service man hung up his receiver. Lucien went upstairs, his heart fluttering at thought of what impended. Suppose he were wrong. Suppose it were but a nightmare. How would Etienne greet him thereafter? He would have lost a pleasant acquaintanceship. How could Desmortes have become homicidal in his tendencies? Lucien could not understand it. But Monsieur Clemenceau's life was needed for France. It must not be sacrificed to the designs of a man suddenly turned manic. Even if Etienne's words were those of nightmare, it were best to safeguard the tiger of France against even a dream suggestion. Comforted by the thought, Lucien feverishly awaited the advent of the bloodhounds of France. They were not long in arriving, 3 of them, tall, powerful, determined men. They entered Lucien's apartment, and with him listened against the wall between the 2 apartments. Etienne still was raving. "Tomorrow he dies." His voice was more a heavy moan. "Charlotte, don't look at me that way. Turn. God, you smile. Ah, fiend. Clemenceau, die. When I thrust, farewell." It was enough. The 3 men tiptoed from the apartment and into the hall. Then, with 3 burly shoulders hard pressed against Etienne's door, they burst in. As though warned by some prescience in dream, Desmortes had awakened and was sitting up in bed. His right hand grasped the hilt of the poniard of Charlotte Corday, poised, ready to strike. The detectives rushed toward him, drawing revolvers. Etienne gave a despairing cry. Then, with swift, unerring aim, he lifted the dagger of Charlotte Corday and plunged it deep into his heart. Clemenceau was saved. Etienne's diary was found by the trio after a diligent search of the whole apartment. The dummy figure in his room was stripped of the coat des Morts had placed upon it. The crude diagram of ribs and heart was revealed on the cloth he had utilized for the purpose. Beneath it, foul in odor, and sliced almost to ribbons by the many thrusts of the poniard, the sleuths found the ham. It were ridiculous were it not so tragic in its significance. Plucking the poniard from the suicide's heart and taking it, the diary, and the dummy form with them, the three ordinarily attired gendarmes of the most efficient police department in Europe went down the stairs and to their automobile against the curb outside. Lucien was warned to say nothing, as it was feared publicity might inspire another attack on Monsieur Clemenceau, or affect him in his convalescence from the bullet wounds inflicted in the previous attempt on his life. Heightened around the details concerning the finding of the popular Monsieur Etienne des Morts, stabbed to death in his apartment in the Pension de Messieurs. To the world the police gave a tale of murder and their hunt for the slayer of des Morts. But in the private archives of the Secret Service of France are set forth the details in the thwarting of a crime which might have affected the whole world's policies. And in its chamber of horrors are the hollowed chest dummy and Etienne's diary. Having obtained possession of Charlotte Corday's poniard, cursed with the anathema of Marat's slayer, the French government pondered what to do with the weapon. It was deemed inadvisable to permit its sinister influence again to wreck men's minds. Its history was traced. One member in every generation of the des Morts family, it was learned, had been either a murderer, a suicide, or a criminal ever since the poniard was taken from the bloody, reeking hands of Charlotte Corday. After many plans for its disposal had been offered, considered, and rejected, it was decided to destroy the malign blade. But how destroy it? That was the question. One suggested casting it into the Seine, amid appropriate ceremonies. Another would have it buried. The ocean as a grave for it likewise was mentioned. Smelting it into steel with other ore seemed to be the happiest solution. Thus smelted into an ingot or pig of steel, it would remove entirely any possibility of the poniard's future use as a weapon. This disposition, therefore, was decided upon. With other odds and ends of iron and steel, the poniard of Charlotte Corday was cast into the crucibles of the Longueviere Steel Company of Paris. The government breathed easier. It believed the curse was ended and that Charlotte's poniard would bring harm no more. 3. The steel revenue cutter La Marne, fitted with a new boiler made by the Longueviere Steel Company of Paris, left her dry dock in Marseille and steamed out into the Mediterranean. Her new boiler was the last word in modern construction. It had been inspected and had withstood the maximum pressure test applied in such inspections. Captain Raoul Cartier and his engineer Jacques Dulay were well pleased with the excellent adjunct to their craft, which had been thoroughly overhauled in dry dock. They could attain a speed heretofore impossible with the discarded boiler. Since the armistice, France had turned a vigilant eye toward her coast to prevent smuggling. The Marseille district, as always, was especially notorious for the traffic in contraband. Cartier had been given strictest orders to halt any suspicious craft and, if necessary, to fire on any which might flee an inspection. Several vessels were stopped, examined, and permitted to proceed. It was a monotonous grind of routine duty, but the third day marked a break in the monotony. A rakish steam yacht hove in sight, every line of her built for speed. Captain Cartier viewed this craft with deep interest through his binoculars. "We shall see," he muttered, signaling Dulé for more speed. Under heavier pressure, the La Marne darted like a thing alive through the Mediterranean swells, straight toward the yacht. The stranger evidently had no intention of submitting to an overhauling. No sooner had the French revenue cutter put on speed toward her than the yacht made a swift turn about and fairly flew through the seas. Mile after mile went pursuer and pursued without any appreciable gain by the La Marne. Captain Cartier, by means of a tube to the engine room, bade Dulé to add more speed. "Up to the maximum now," was the purport of Dulé's reply. "Can't stand another pound of pressure." "We must," raged the captain, "else they escape. More speed, more speed." Downstairs, Dulé scrutinized his gauges. More speed meant more steam, more pressure on the new boiler already strained some pounds beyond the maximum test pressure it could withstand. It were next door to suicide to add more, but Dulé shrugged. It was duty. The captain wanted more speed. He must have it, if every man aboard die for it. Working like Trojans, Dulé and his firemen soon had steam so high that the engineer momentarily feared an explosion. "We gain!" shouted Cartier through the tube to cheer Dulé. "But 10 minutes more, Dulé, 10 minutes more." Nervous with dread, Dulé watched the ever-climbing gauge. Sacre! If he ever got through this alive, never again would he risk this pressure. Yet he knew that he would risk it, because it would be for France. France, the glorious, the unconquerable, the white flame of imperishable honor. 5 minutes later, a gun boomed overhead. Cartier had opened fire on the fleeing yacht, but he still was too far off for his necessarily light artillery to reach. "Just a little faster," he implored Dulé. The La Marne literally bounded forward in response to Dulé's desperate effort to win for his captain. 2 minutes more, Dulé," feverishly shouted Cartier. 2 minutes, and our guns bite." But his guns never bit. With a frightful roar, the overstrained boiler burst, almost cracking the cutter in two. Captain Cartier was cast flat on his face, unconscious. 4 of his crew were blown skyward, dead, Dulé among them. Under her own momentum, the La Marne staggered forward many feet, then drifted and began to settle by the head so quickly that when she took her last plunge, she carried with her the remaining members of her unconscious, ill-starred crew. Dulé's body was found by an expedition sent to search for the missing La Marne. From his breast protruded a thin, triangular-shaped piece of steel, not unlike an ancient dagger's blade. Its point had found his heart. The searchers plucked out the metal and cast it overboard. To them, there seemed no reason for keeping it or leaving it embedded in poor Dulé's heart. But when the story of the La Marne's engineer was told in France, together with the display of debris from the ill-fated cutter, certain high officials in the Secret Service shuddered. For into the steel of the La Marne's boiler had been smelted the poniard of Charlotte Corday. And who could say the steel in Dulé's heart was not the same as that which ended the career of Marat in those long-ago days of the French Revolution? The facts are told. Is the curse now dead? The years that lie ahead only can tell. End of section 23.
Section number 24 of the Thrill Book Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Lyra Scout. The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. Suspense by Xavier Lecompte. Carol was uncomfortable. He had the feeling that the 4 walls about him made him their prisoner. The stillness, the delicate odor of flowers standing dimly in a far corner, the magnificent draperies that hung like shadows on all sides, the air of mystery which seemed to lurk even in the harmless ticking of a clock down the hallway. It all puzzled him. His was a direct nature. He was unaccustomed to the subtle ways of the East. But the command had gone forth that he must see her, and, unafraid of anything, as he usually was, he had accepted his orders quietly. Many moments passed in a sort of desolate stillness amid all the luxury. A master hand had evidently decorated the chamber. Each detail, unpretentious in itself, melted like the tones of a symphony into the whole. It was as though the owner of the place had created a separate and individual universe, all his own. Carroll had wondered from the very beginning. He recalled distinctly the bowing servant who ushered him cautiously up the wide staircase, throwing open the heavy door with one sweep of his arm. He had stood for a moment on the threshold, puzzled, distraught. If it hadn't been that he was acting under orders, he would have turned back. But he cursed himself for being too imaginative, and entered. He was on trial, so to speak, and it was important that he appear courageous, even if he were not. He sat in a chair somewhat away from a large open fireplace, where a fire slumbered among the red coals, casting a mysterious light over a pair of velvet curtains that hung solemnly near him. His idea was that a door lay beyond. The room's silence was what managed to set his nerves on edge. If there was anyone behind him in the darkness, they made no sound. He thought he had heard the light scraping of a shoe on the rung of a chair a little while before, but dismissed the thought from his mind. Suddenly his ears caught a faint sound beyond the curtains. He grew tense. Was it possible that she might come through them? This held him interested above all else. His eyes swept back and forth across the folds of velvet. They lingered for a moment on what appeared to be a shining jewel. From this point they did not stir, for the seeming jewel was immediately followed by a finger, and then the most sensitive hand he had ever seen. It hung in the curtains like a white rose, half lost in the moonlight. For a second he wasn't sure but what it was a rose. But there now appeared the slenderness of an arm and a cool throat around which a necklace of jewels clung and glittered. Carroll couldn't move. His arms had tightened on the chair, and he sat like a piece of carved stone. So much depended on what he should do, what he must say. His whole future depended on the decision made in the next few moments. At least, that was the way he felt then. As he gazed upon her dead white face, he caught his first glimpse of the gown. A shimmering dark affair that followed her supple body closely until it seemed lost in the darkness that hung around her feet. Gasping, Carroll leaned forward. It was perfect. He could tell them, but he must convince them. His attention was at this moment drawn away from the lovely creature before him by a loud voice that broke the silence like the crack of a rifle. "Jakob, turn on the lights so these nice buyers from the West can see the wonderful gowns our house carries. Ah, gentlemen, ain't this divine?" End of section number 24.
Section 25 of the Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. Soldiers and Sailors Personal Relief Section. How Uncle Sam Musters Out His Soldiers. To the man in ranks, this is the day of days. He is going home. There is an excuse for sentimentality at this time, and I have all the sympathy in the world for these boys. The War Department looks upon the private with as much favor as it does a general where records and insurance are concerned. I might go so far as to say that this applies in all cases. After all, each one in the army is a soldier, no matter whether the man has a plain shoulder strap or silver stars. A careful account must be rendered by officers in the field concerning every man in their detachment or company. This accounting goes through the famous military channels up to the highest authority, where it is transcribed and kept for future reference. It is interesting to note, in this connection, that the morning reports of companies in the Civil War are identical with those kept in this Great War, and they have been preserved with as much care as though they were exact evidence of the laws of the Medes and Persians. With the start of the Great War, or rather, with the entry of America, the authorities at Washington were confronted with many major problems, one of the greatest of these being a satisfactory method of keeping a record of each man in the service. It might be that the great powers in the army worked out the present system, but I very much doubt it. From an experience of 2 years, both in the ranks and as an officer, I am inclined to say that the men in the field have really been the instigators and developers of every bit of the system, which has been given the name of personnel work. When a man gets up in the morning in the army, his record for the day begins, and it is set down with as much attention to detail from that hour until he retires, as though he were the only man about whom a record was being kept. A roll is called at reveille, and still another in the evening when he quits his day's toil. A roster is kept carefully as to his various sicknesses and the causes thereof. Still another roster records his pay, and there are many more rosters for 100 different purposes. Careful notation is made of the history of this particular individual from the hour which he enters service until he leaves it. A mere catalogue of the forms used would run into the thousands. These forms are divided into classes, the most important being those of the Adjutant General's office. These concern enlistments, discharges, deaths, desertions, and routine matters. The Quartermaster Department naturally keeps a careful watch over its property and its distribution, and the number of forms there are countless. The medical, ordnance, aviation, and all other departments of the Army, each with individual pride and necessity, has developed its own system of forms. It is truly amazing how wide in scope and infinite in detail are the regulations that govern the preparation of all forms. To the layman, such strict accountability seems strange at first sight. With the gradual growth of admiration for the service, this surprise wears off, and one begins to comprehend the necessity for it all. There have been many criticisms of the means and methods used in the Army, but so far I have yet to meet someone who has a better system to put in its place. It may be involved. It may be hard to understand. However, it works. That is the acid test. The principal bit of paperwork is the service record. This is the personal and intimate history of each individual in the ranks. It is a little booklet wherein are recorded the name of the man, his army serial number, his home address, his nearest beneficiary, and description of his person, individual scars, size of shoes, etc., followed by an account of his previous enlistments, and then all that happens to him until he dies or is discharged. This booklet accompanies a soldier wherever he goes. If he is court-martialed, this is where the record appears. If he wins a medal in action, if he is wounded in battle, it is written down in these pages. For example, if a man deserts, the service record is forwarded to the Adjutant General of the Army, accompanied by an exact description on another form, and the man is posted as a deserter over the country. At this point, it is interesting to note that there have been fewer desertions since the war was declared than before, even though the Army has been multiplied 40 or 50 times. 88% of the men brought up before court-martial have been convicted. no man has been executed for a purely military offense. The second document, which makes a man's hair turn gray in the service, is the pay card. This is a little slip of paper upon which is written the dates when the man is paid. It is signed by the soldier and witnessed by an officer and the personnel adjutant, who uses it as a legal document to pay the men. It is natural that extreme care is taken to see that this card is accurate. The personnel adjutant is responsible for all payments of troops. If he makes an error of some magnitude and it is shown that it was his fault, he pays the bill. When I say that, as personnel adjutant, I have prepared rolls for as much as $250,000. Some conception may be obtained of the responsibility which the government places upon an officer. Had it not been for the loyal cooperation of the enlisted men who prepare these rolls, I don't know where I would be at the present moment. Right here, I want to say that if the public at large knew of the loyalty of the average man to the service and the amount of work which he is compelled to perform, it would be amazed. At one camp where I was stationed, our office never closed. The men went on in shifts, and we formed brigades almost overnight and shipped them off to France with never failing regularity. The third record of importance is the allotment blank. This is the form which records the amount of money deducted from the man's pay each month, which he gives to his family. The country knows already that Uncle Sam helps the soldier's family by adding to his allotment. A concrete example will explain this, should the reader not understand. For instance, a man is married and has 2 children. He is compelled to make an allotment of $15 for the wife and family. The government adds $15 for the wife, $10 for the first child, and $7.50 for the second, making a total of $32.50 in addition to the man's quota. It is needless to explain that this record is about as important as any. A companion paper to this is the insurance form. On this piece of paper, the amount of insurance which a man takes out and the name of the beneficiary are noted. If the man is 28 years old and desires $10,000 war risk insurance, he pays $6.70 a month, and this is deducted from his pay. If he should be killed, his beneficiary would be paid $57.50 per month for 20 years. The next record is the soldier's qualification card. Upon this little piece of cardboard, there is painstakingly recorded the man's principal occupation in civilian life and all other occupations in which he has had experience. The purpose of this card is to note what a man's qualifications are, so that as far as possible he may be placed in similar work in the Army. This card has, in addition, his educational qualifications, his proficiency in foreign languages, if any, his mental and physical status, and the 100 other details necessary to the proper assignment of the man. To explain what this card stands for would take a complete article. This card is prepared after an interview with the man. It has been the efficient instrument by which we have been able to equip and send whole divisions to France in 3 months, whipping a raw bunch of civilians into soldiers almost overnight. Now follows a long list of papers. It is unnecessary to list them here. Each one is important in its place and cannot be neglected. When one remembers that all of these papers have got to be prepared in the front-line trenches, as well as in the comfortable offices in Washington, some idea may be obtained of the difficulty of Army paperwork. The company clerk has to grind away at his typewriter under shell fire. Certain reports have to be made no matter what conditions the company is working under. No excuses are in order. A thing has to be done, and that is all there is to it. Did you ever stop to think of it? The list of casualties is a result of painstaking and long-suffering hours of men working out in the mud and rain and snow, going without their meals and suffering hardships beyond description. It is not a simple matter to do things. That is why the American Army has been the marvel of the world. It has offered an example to other nations which holds one breathless in amazement. I went into the Army March 1917 as a private, and I saw the general development of the system from the very start. Hardened as I have become to its many angles, I have never gotten over my surprise that plain citizens were able to adapt themselves to any conditions, handling highly technical problems, settling them efficiently and speedily, and doing what it has taken generations of Europeans to learn. Now we come to the day of discharge. All of these records have to be tested and weighed and investigated. The most minute detail cannot be overlooked. If an error has been found, it must be looked into. The importance of these records is great, in view of the fact that when a man returns to civilian life, some controversy may arise, and the settlement of the case depends on the accuracy of the papers. So, when the date of mustering out arrives, the first sergeants and company clerks must buckle down to the hardest kind of work. Each soldier must be paid up to the day he leaves and clear up all shortages in equipment or pay for the losses. He is given a uniform which he is allowed to wear for 4 months. It is then returned to the government. He is instructed concerning his rights under the insurance law. His allotment is stopped. All indebtedness to the government is cleared up. He is given a final physical examination. The man is then handed a discharge certificate, which shows that he has been honorably separated from the service and is entitled to travel pay to the place where he entered the Army. The companies are lined up, the organization commanders make a brief speech to the men, outlining to them what they have gained by their life in the Army, cautioning them to remember that discipline is as necessary to the private citizen as it is to the soldier, and wishing them the best of luck in the world. This ceremony is made as impressive as possible, and the reader would be surprised to know that many men regret leaving the ranks, even though the life has been a hard one. The day will come when we will all look back to those months of weary toil with a feeling of cheerfulness that war gave us a chance to buckle down and forget self in the thought of our country. When the men are gone, the papers are bundled together with rosters of the names and are sent to the Adjutant General of the Army for storage. At Washington, complete records are kept, and it is possible to pull out at a moment's notice the history of any man. This outline of how men are discharged from the service should convince the reader, for good and all, that it is not a simple thing to send our boys back home. There is another thing to remember. Your boy is a better citizen as a result of his experience as a soldier. He has been taught to think of others. Unselfishness is an art, and if he has learned it thoroughly, this one thing alone makes the war not so bad a thing after all. Discipline in the American Army has not been imposed by higher authority. We have not had to grind our men to death through long years. Our discipline is self-imposed and starts with the men. The American boy takes naturally to his duty. It is easy to teach him how to do things. His mind is nimble, and he grasps information with amazing facility. If he comes back to his home with a better conception of his duty to his family, and is satisfied as a result of these months of privation and struggle, the relatives and friends may feel gratified that he has been granted so fine a chance to learn a man's job. The returning soldier will be the controlling factor in politics for the next generation. What he has learned in the Army, he will impart to others in civilian life. That is why we take so much trouble when we discharge him to impress upon his mind the dignity of the uniform and the privilege of a soldier to die for things that are larger than his own petty self. America responded to the President almost as one man. She sent her sons gladly, and the thousands who died surely did not die in vain. Let us be thankful that we have been granted an opportunity to prove our worth to the other nations. Also, that we have lived up to the ideal which knows neither greed nor malice. Let us be thankful that we have been led by a president whose mind comprehends all things. In the parlance of the army, they called us, and we came across. Caring for disabled soldiers. An extensive program of caring for disabled soldiers after their discharge from military service has been announced by the War Risk Insurance Bureau, which is charged by Congress with this work. 21 hospitals with a capacity of 1,500 beds already are in use, and the War Department has turned over to the Treasury 7 camp hospitals for care of disability cases. These are to be enlarged and improved out of the $9 million fund appropriated for hospitals for disabled soldiers to be controlled by the War Risk Insurance Bureau and conducted by the Public Health Service, another Treasury agency. When treatment in the hospitals of the War Department fails to restore men to such condition that they are fit for active service and they are discharged, the work of the Bureau of War Risk Insurance begins. Under the provisions of the War Risk Insurance Act, all soldiers 10% disabled from causes suffered in the line of duty are entitled to compensation and to treatment by the Bureau of War Risk Insurance. Any man disabled in the service and discharged from the service may make application for treatment to the Public Health Service station in his hometown or at the nearest station. If immediate treatment is necessary, it will be administered by the Public Health Service. If the need for treatment is not immediate, the case will be reviewed by the Bureau of War Risk Insurance and assigned to a hospital. Men who, after discharge, develop physical disabilities attributable to military service are entitled to treatment. The Bureau of War Risk Insurance may be called upon to care for more than 25,000 cases of men discharged for tubercular tendencies. The War Department is turned over to the Treasury Department for the care of disability cases hospitals located at Camp Cody, New Mexico, Camp Hancock, Georgia, Camp Joseph E. Johnston, Florida, Camp Beauregard, Louisiana, Camp Logan, Texas, Camp Fremont, California, and at Perryville, Maryland. About $750,000 will be expended for enlarging and improving these hospitals. The Treasury Department has purchased the Speedway Hospital in Chicago with a capacity of 15,000 beds. Improvements and changes costing $500,000 will be made in the hospital, and it is planned to make this hospital a national center of medical study and research. Portions of the Battle Mountain Sanitarium at Hot Springs, South Dakota, have been taken over for the work of the War Risk Bureau. Another hospital to be taken over is located at Corpus Christi, Texas, while $1,500,000 will be expended in the erection of a hospital at Dawson Springs, Kentucky, on land acquired as a gift to the government. A hospital costing $900,000 will be built at Norfolk, Virginia, and $550,000 has been set aside for the erection of a hospital in or near the District of Columbia. The Marine Hospital at Stapleton, Staten Island, will be taken over, and $190,000 is to be expended in enlargement and improvement. A soldier's friend. The 66th Congress did practically nothing of real consequence for the American soldiers, either to reward them for their fine work in putting the finishing touch to the Huns, or to render them assistance when the time comes for going back to peacetime pursuits. This was the statement made by Representative Royal C. Johnson of South Dakota in answer to the question, "What did the last Congress do for the soldiers?" All the talk about passing Reconstruction or readjustment legislation to benefit the soldiers ended in just talk, said Johnson. Representative Johnson was a soldier in the war, serving in all the grades, from private to captain, served in the House of Representatives before the war was declared, and was discharged from the Army and went back to Congress after the armistice was signed. He appears to be in a better position than any other member of Congress to answer the question. All that Congress did to benefit the soldiers was to give them 2 months extra pay upon their discharge and allow them to keep their uniforms, continued Representative Johnson. Congress did nothing in the way of the much-discussed reconstruction of legislation, and what reconstruction there has been was carried on by the federal departments. The work of sending to college after their discharge young men who were taken away from school and put into the Army during the war was carried on by the departments. A large number of young men were sent back to college by the government, which paid their expenses. But Congress failed to do anything to offer employment for the returning soldiers who had been taken away from steady jobs and who, in the majority of cases, could not return to them. It also failed to adopt a system like that of Canada for giving the soldiers extra pay upon discharge based on the length and character of their service. On the contrary, many thousands of the soldiers were brought back and dumped in New York City instead of provision being made for sending them back to their homes, their families, and their jobs. Many of them are still there, the subjects of charity, and can neither obtain suitable employment there nor get back to where they came from. Another woeful omission of Congress was the failure to reform the Articles of War and the court-martial regulations so that an American can serve in the Army with a feeling that he will get the measure of justice to which he would be entitled in civil life. Representative Johnson is confident that reforms will be effected in the court-martial proceedings and sweeping changes made in the Articles of War by the next Congress. He has already obtained enough pledges from the members of the next Congress to ensure these reforms, he said. Soldiers saved from death by President. 3 more death sentences imposed by General Court-Martial have been commuted by President Wilson. 2 of the men had been given the death penalty for willful disobedience of orders, but the third, Aaron H. Smith, was sentenced to death at Camp Greenleaf, Georgia, for having uttered unusually seditious statements. According to the papers forwarded here, Smith said he would rather be in a German military prison under the military heel of Germany than in the United States Army. On another occasion, in the presence of many officers and enlisted men, he said that German atrocity was better than American autocracy. Major General Henry G. Sharp, commander of the Department of the Southeast, recommended that the sentence be commuted to dishonorable discharge and imprisonment for 25 years. But President Wilson commuted it to dishonorable discharge and 15 years at Fort Leavenworth. The other death sentences commuted were those of Arshag Ashbahane, Company M, 4th Infantry, to dishonorable discharge and 10 years, and Frank J. Burke, Company A, 1st Casualty Battalion, dishonorable discharge and 15 years. Commutation to 15 years imprisonment by President Wilson of death sentences imposed by court-martial on Benjamin Gorski and Galari Boki was announced by the War Department. The men were tried at Camp Dix for refusal to obey orders and for desertion. President Wilson disapproved the sentence of dismissal on Lieutenant Albert D. Smith, charged with attacking another officer with a riding whip in the Pennsylvania station at New York last June. He ordered the sentence reduced to a reprimand, restriction to camp for 6 months, and $300 fine. Questions and answers. Private J.R. Question. I was discharged from the Army in January after 10 months service overseas and 6 months spent in training camps here. Before entering the service, I had been a sales clerk in a large provision house, where I had acquired a thorough knowledge of dairy products. But on my return here, I was unable to secure my old position, and tried unsuccessfully to get another. Then, friends of mine who own a dairy farm in Nebraska wrote offering me work for them. but my home and my people are here, and I should not like to leave them for the West. What should I do? The opportunity offered by my friends is the only one open to me. Should I take it? Answer. You should know best about this, but it seems to me a wise thing for you to accept the position offered you in view of the fact that it seems difficult to secure one in your own hometown. Corporal LMF. Question. Before I went overseas in May 1918, I had been on friendly terms with a girl of whom I was very fond. I had hoped that when I came back, I would ask her to marry me. But she now seems to take no interest whatever in me, and it is just as if we had never been more than acquaintances. She does not even ask me to call on her, and though I am still very fond of her, I am not the sort to push myself where I do not know my standing. Please advise me what I should do. Answer. This is a delicate situation. I think that you should either have a heart-to-heart talk with the girl in question, or else drop her altogether from your mind. If she does not care for you, surely you do not want to marry her. However, faint hearts never win fair ladies. I would make an attempt to learn the truth from her, at least. Sergeant S.G. Question. I was drafted in January 1918 at the age of 22, went to France soon after, and returned to this country in the spring of 1919. During my absence abroad, my mother, who was a widow and with whom I had always lived, had remarried. My stepfather, though an American, was strongly pro-German and a man whom I never liked or got on with. Now I get along even worse with him, and feel that I cannot continue to make my home as I used to with my mother because he is there. I love my mother deeply, and should hate to leave her, but feel that for my happiness I must. Do you think I should wait a little longer, and hope that things at home will improve? Answer. It is unfortunate, this situation, and I can only advise you to talk at length with your mother. Perhaps she will understand your position, if you state it fairly and simply. She is entitled to her happiness, but it is to be regretted that she married a man out of sympathy with his own country. Private C.N. Question. I have lately seen a man I know well who was drafted the same time I was, sent to the same camp, trained in the same outfit, and discharged at the same time. This man was a bugler, and, so far as I know, never shot an army rifle in his life. But here at home, and still in uniform, I have seen him wearing a sharpshooter's medal. In our camp, buglers were not required to drill, go to the rifle range, or stand any of the usual formations. I should like to know where this faker got his medal. Answer. I would say offhand that your friend is merely adopting an honor to which he is not entitled. Give him fair warning of the dangerous consequences of such an act. It is illegal to wear any military insignia not fairly earned through official channels. HPG. Question. Since being discharged from the Army several months ago, I have been receiving each month war risk insurance blanks and letters from the government. I had not seen overseas or suffered any injury in service, and thought that in my case the insurance automatically stopped on the date of discharge. Why does the government keep writing to me? I don't want to keep up the insurance and never wrote the government that I did so. Answer. You are very unwise to give up your insurance. You are allowed 6 months' grace, and if you cannot assume the same amount you carried while in the Army, you can at least take up a small portion of it. Write at once to the Bureau in Washington and make arrangements to continue your insurance. Interested. Question. What regulations have been drafted covering the equipment that a soldier may keep after discharge? Answer. Every enlisted man, on discharge, the War Department announced, will be allowed to retain as his personal property the following articles of uniform equipment: overseas cap for men with overseas service, hat for others, olive drab shirt, woolen coat and ornaments, woolen breeches, 1 pair shoes, 1 pair leggings, 1 waist belt, 1 slicker and overcoat, 2 suits underwear, 4 pairs stockings, 1 pair gloves, 1 toilet set, 1 barracks bag, gas mask, and helmet for overseas men only. Soldiers who have turned in their equipments are authorized to redraw them by applying to the Director of Storage in this city. The department calls attention to the fact it is unlawful for a discharged soldier to wear the regulation uniform without the red chevrons, which show his connection with the military establishment has been terminated according to law. End of section 25. Read by Marissa D. 6, Clearwater, Florida, June 14th, 2025.
Section 26 of the Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. Cross Trails, by editor Ronald Oliphant. The following letter appeared not long ago in one of the New York dailies. We think it should prove of interest to Thrill Book readers. To the editor. Sir, is there such a thing as communication with the dead? Conan Doyle and Sir Oliver Lodge, intellectual and keenly poised men, whose writing thousands have read with admiration, both assert that they have received communications from their sons, killed in the war. Many wonders that were fantastic dreams a few years back are now realities. Man flies thousands of miles. He throws his voice across oceans and continents. He sends messages around the world without wires. I've always been skeptical of happenings or manifestations beyond the ken of demonstrable science, but the modern marvels give me pause. May it not be that a link exists between the finite and infinite that is only a branch of science still in its infancy? SV. We are inclined to agree with the writer of the above letter. We have entirely recovered from our one-time habit of scoffing at what we didn't understand. If men like Conan Doyle and Sir Oliver Lodge believe in the unseen, we at least feel at liberty to keep open hearts concerning the matter. We have thought a great deal about it. We have published a number of mystic and occult stories. We have been wondering what our readers thought about the matter. Why not start some thought along these lines? If you are interested in any occult or mysterious philosophy, why not write to us? We will print the best letters we receive and open up some of the pages in the Thrill Book to the discussion. Candidly, it will be as much for our own information as for yours. The psychic field is enormous and amazing in its widespread and in its ramifications. To doubt that much of psychic claim has full proof may be imbecile. Mind-reading, mental telepathy, and 100 significant phenomena are established to our minds beyond dispute, as are the everyday parts of material industries. What is needed more than anything else is an intelligent discussion of the many sides of the questions. Are the dead with us? There is a good question to ask. There are people who scoff and those who claim they are not interested. But many of these are either posers or tellers of untruths. It is the one subject which everyone discusses sooner or later. Let our readers discuss this matter publicly in the Thrill Book. We will be glad to publish the best letters from both sides, provided they do not exceed 300 words. How little we really know about the unseen world of science. Only now and then word comes to the layman of some marvelous discovery that sets the world afire. It was so with radium, wireless telephones, the tank. We knew nothing about them until they were in use. This is only natural. Science is a study that requires a lifetime to master, and even then the student realizes that he has only gathered a few of the fundamentals together. We personally are rather interested in the development of the dramatic angles of science, and when the rapid-fire novelette 1,000 Degrees Below Zero by Murray Leinster came into our hands, we jumped at the chance to put it in the Thrill Book. Here is a writer who not only understands science from the viewpoint of a scholar, but who is also a born fictioneer. Without a doubt, 1,000 degrees below zero contains a very strange situation. We leave it to you. Suppose on a broiling hot day in August you saw a cake of ice floating down the Hudson River, and from the center there rose a column of steam. Sounds wild, doesn't it? Read 1,000 degrees below zero and find out how simple it all is if you know the laws of science. The second installment of The Opium Ship by H. Bedford Jones carries Sir Gerald Desmond into a still more conflicting series of adventures. It is a pleasure to read a serial so entertainingly written, so brimful of action and mystery. Todd Robbins contributes another startling bit of fiction called A Voice from Beyond. There is nothing that comes from his pen that does not grip one from the first line to the last. In addition, he knows the art of short story writing about as well as any of the younger school. We are going to give his new novel, Red of Surly, a little publicity here, even though it doesn't appear in the thrill book. It was published this spring by Harper & Brothers, and it sets a new standard for fiction. We are glad to say we have only recently purchased one of Mr. Robbins' new novels, and we are going to give it to you in the very near future. It is weird, unusual, fantastic. We can guarantee from close observation that nothing like it has appeared in any of the other magazines. Among the stories in this issue that we can recommend especially are The Lost Empire by Frank Wall, The Mate by May Freud Dickinson, and The Poniard of Charlotte Corday by Francois de Vallient. There are two bizarre occult tales, Back to Earth by R. Ray Baker and Room 13 by Will S. Gidley. What do you think of the first story in the Tales of the Doubleman series? The author, Clyde Broadwell, has made a close study of the psychic and unseen. It was a victory for us to get him to put into fiction his interesting theories. Here is a man to keep your eye on. It is gratifying to note here the unusual amount of praise we are receiving about our soldiers' and sailors' personal relief section. Letters come in regularly from all parts of the world. The requests for information do not all get into print because many of them are confidential. We are including every letter that we are able to publish because in this way the information becomes of general interest. Stray bits from our readers' letters. At last, a magazine that isn't afraid to print unusual stories. It's quite a satisfaction. HTR. Please mail me a specimen copy of the thrill book together with the subscription rates and application. A.E. Hallowell. 29 Story Square, Barrow, in Turnus, England. I've passed the thrill book among the boys of our detachment. Without exception, they one and all voted about the rip-snortinest magazine they've ever tackled. In one instance, while Private Claude Logue of North Dakota was in the midst of a story, a call came for him to appear at the orderly room. On returning, he found someone had purloined the magazine. What he said regarding the fellow who took it need not appear here, for the language was too hot for paper. Later, the magazine was returned, but Logue never forgave the man who deprived him of his enjoyment. This goes to show that the thrill book is already making itself felt a sensation. All the men who tackled it are turning in their subscriptions. Private W.R. Loescher, 335th Field Artillery, USA, home address 25 Parker Street, Holyoke, Massachusetts. I have read your third issue of the thrill book. I especially read your editorial on the back cover. Needless to say, your magazine looks good. CLS, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Would like you to put me down as a subscriber. Send me a bill and check will go to you by first mail. CGB, Ossining, New York. I have a copy of your new magazine before me, and have found it very interesting. J.C. Hawes, Lexington, Kentucky. Congratulations for the advent of the new adventure in current literature for the people, the thrill book. J.E.B., Los Angeles, California. Bully, fine stuff. I'm reading every issue and shall subscribe at once. Here at last is the truly big venture. Miami, Florida. Ex-Lieutenant D.B. I feel such a deep interest in the thrill book's success that I'm going to dare your disfavor and suggest that if you had fewer continued stories, it would be more popular. One serial and a two-part story seems to me sufficient. What you have is excellent, however. Mrs. W.B.T., Hagerstown, Maryland. I have just looked through your new semi-monthly publication, The Thrill Book. It is capital. The stories are virile and powerful. It is a man's book. The feature Around the World is also very interesting. It is a valuable asset to the new magazine. J.L., New York, New York. Accept my good wishes for the success of the thrill book. I've been talking it up a bit among my friends and will try to boost the thing here as much as I can. I'm a physician, and many of my patients like to read. J.U.G., Salt Lake City, Utah. The Thrill Book is the first magazine I have read in English that really lives up to the word periodical. It stands for a great ideal. The numbers I have read convince me that you know how to conduct a magazine. The series of notices on the back cover have appealed strongly. Good luck. Monsieur D.R.N., Paris, France. The basic idea of the Thrill Book has interested me greatly. R.W., Camden, New Jersey. To paraphrase, for many long days I have been waiting for you, my son. Myself and several others whose desires are for the metaphysical and weird have often spoken about the lack of an unusual magazine. Go to it. FBR, Chicago, Illinois. Here are a few alternate titles suggested by one reader for the Thrill Book. Magic Stories, The Weaver, Sensation, The Web, Thrilling Tales, The Maze, Crystal Sphere, The Constellation, The Comet. This reader has been very helpful, and I am sorry that she will not let us use her name. Wishing you all success in the new venture. GN, New Brighton, Staten Island, New York. I hope your magazine wins out. I know it will. As soon as I am settled here, I am going to get you a lot of subscribers. I want to watch the Thrill Book grow. Mrs. D.J.M., Amherst, Massachusetts. The Thrill Book ought to be a winner. I believe there will be a wide demand for a magazine of this nature. J.J., Weiser, Idaho. I have just seen a copy of the Thrill Book. I have not known before that there was such a wonderful magazine. LMT, San Jose, California. I feel sure that your magazine, which is a real innovation, should meet with success, and shall watch its development with great interest. It is encouraging that a publication of this peculiar sort has fallen into the control of a man in sympathy with its aims. GB, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The new magazine is a great idea and ought to be a success. L.W., St. Louis, Missouri. What a wonderful conception! Your selection of stories is immense. Especially did I like Profit by Loss by Clarence L. Andrews. He is a clean, vigorous, imaginative writer. Hope you publish more by him. Nothing But Dust is the strongest tale I have read in many a day. Give us more. I wish that the author, Frederick Booth, had a story in every issue. SNT, New Orleans, Louisiana. Please convey my compliments to Mr. Snetton for his truly surprising story, Magic in Manhattan. It is seldom one runs across a story that is at once humorous and fantastic. The Thrill Book has already made a place for itself. It will continue so if you keep it up to the standard set in late issues. A.L., Helena, Montana. End of section 26.
Section 27 of the Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Olivia J.P. French. The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. Around the World. Around the World. Young Veteran. The most popular war hero of Hibbing, Michigan, W.S. Smith, 16 years old, has recovered from his wounds and is again ready for duty. Smith, who enlisted in the American Navy at the age of 15 and was discharged from service because of his youth, succeeded in joining the Canadian Army a few months later and was sent overseas. His adventures would make a thrilling war novel. He has been wounded 3 times, given up for dead, and was once reported as missing. He received 1 wound through the breast, and the bullet came out of his back. He was hit twice in the hand. Old Army Sergeant spotted Lieutenant. George W. Keller, an experienced Army sergeant, was walking up Park Row, New York City, one afternoon recently. In front of the Park Row building, he saw a young man wearing the shoulder bars, hat cores, and puttees of a United States Army lieutenant. The coat, however, was of a material such as is generally worn by privates. Keller did not salute. Instead, he walked past and then turned around to make a closer observation of the lieutenant. "What in the hell are you looking at?" the latter demanded. "I am looking at you," was the reply. "What are you looking at me for?" exclaimed the lieutenant. I'm looking at you as part of the inborn right of an American citizen. I think you are phony." An agent of the Department of Justice happened along, and both men accompanied him to the department's office in the Park Row building. The lieutenant said he was Charles Thomas, 18 years old, of number 328 Chauncey Street, Brooklyn, of the American Red Cross. He was taken to the offices of Assistant United States Attorney Bordeaux, where he produced a card certifying that Charles Thomas was a second lieutenant in the Red Cross Motor Corps. It was signed Dr. Smiley, per RB, and on the back was countersigned Charles Thomas. Inquiry at the offices of the local Red Cross failed to elicit any information concerning the young man. Commissioner Hitchcock held him in $100, charged with illegally wearing the uniform of an Army officer. Fire veteran at 94 leads parade. New York City's oldest fireman, John F. Wenman, felt the rheumatism stirring in his legs at the end of the day, for in the afternoon he had marched 2 miles in the bleak, damp wind at the head of the annual Washington's Birthday Parade of the Exempt and Volunteer Firemen's Association of New York City. Mr. Wenman, who shouted through the trumpet of an assistant chief in 1855, is 94 years old. 65 other former firefighters, none of them younger than 78, marched behind him. Mr. Wenman's white beard floated high in the air, and his legs did not falter as he led the veteran firemen past the reviewing stand in Union Square. Each man wore the heavy helmet he had used in the days when he climbed ladders and handled hose, and dangling at his hip was a cap, which he might put on when the helmet grew tiresome. Half of the men wore the buff uniform of the Exempt Firemen's Association, showing that they had served at least 5 years in the department. The others wore the blue of the Volunteer Firemen's Association. Carefully polished for the occasion, the old hand-power Engine 26, which threw water into the top stories of the skyscrapers of 1841, brought up the rear of the parade, with 30 veterans tugging at the ropes that pulled it. Many old firemen felt too weak to march. Thomas F. Kerrigan, 75 years old, solved the problem of showing his enthusiasm by mounting the reviewing stand and waving a small American flag as his comrades passed, cheering. With him on the stand were John R. Voris, former Commissioner of Elections, Patrick H. Whitney, former Commissioner of Correction, and Alderman John J. McCourt. Dietrich G. Gale, 85 years old, was in charge of the reviewing stand. Led by Belder's band and a squad of mounted policemen, the veteran firemen set out from their headquarters in Jefferson Market. They marched through 10th Street to 5th Avenue and then north to Union Square. When they reached the equestrian statue of George Washington on the south side of the square, they halted. And while the band played the Star-Spangled Banner, John Milligan, 79 years old, scrambled up an old fire ladder and placed a wreath at the feet of the father of his country. Then the veterans proceeded past the reviewing stand, where they waited while the band played a concert piece. The line of march continued west, through 17th Street to 8th Avenue, north to 34th Street, and east to 6th Avenue, where the parade was disbanded. Called a pro-Hun, sues to get even. A lawsuit of extraordinary interest will be tried at the April term of the Logan County Court at Russell Springs, Kansas. It is the first attempt at a backfire of those who were suspected of being pro-German during the war, and who were dealt with publicly by their neighbors for failing to do their duty in war activities. F. J. Hansen of McAllister has brought suit for $120,000 against F. F. E. Brooke and other neighbors for damages which he claims he suffered at their hands. Hansen has lived in Logan County since the 80s. He is a wealthy landowner. During the war, he had a stormy time of life. It is said he refused to buy Liberty bonds, or to contribute to the Red Cross. His neighbors asserted that he was strongly pro-German. The loyal Americans of the community were aroused by Hansen's attitude, it is said, and finally the Hansens were arrested for violating the regulations of the Food Administration. The Hansens suspected that the Macmillans, their neighbors, had furnished the evidence upon which they were arrested, and Hansen purchased 960 acres, which Macmillan had been leasing for many years as pasture land. Franklin E. Brooks, of Winona, was one of the leaders of the community in war activities. He is captain of Company E, Kansas Home Guards, 14th Battalion. He also is interested in a bank. It was these connections which made him a leader of the patriotic sentiment of the county. With the Fourth Liberty Loan coming on last fall, and being anxious that the county should go over the top, Brooke went to Kansas City, Kansas, to consult Fred Robertson, United States District Attorney, it is said, concerning the case of the Hansens. Brooke claims that he was advised by one of Robertson's assistants to tell Hansen that he must make a subscription and buy some bonds. Brooke came back to Winona, and after consultation with Hansen, it was agreed that Hansen was to sell the 960 acres of grazing land to Macmillan for $3,700, enough to cover the price which Hansen had paid for the land and his expenses, so that Hansen would have money enough to invest in Liberty bonds and give to the Red Cross. After the deal was made, Hansen invested $2,500 in bonds, gave $200 to the Red Cross, and deposited the other $1,000 for investment in future war activities. Then the war came to an end, and the armistice was signed. Then also came a lawsuit filed by Hansen against Macmillan to set aside the deed for the land and $120,000 lawsuit against Brooke for damages. Brooke has a son in the Army, a lieutenant of aviation. Phones he's alive after grave is dug. Funeral arrangements were completed, death notices were published, and a grave was being dug for the remains of William I. McLaughlin, 22 years old. When they arrived at the family home in Boston, Massachusetts, the body of a 70-year-old man of the same name, but no relation. This led to the discovery that the boy reported dead was in perfect health, and that there had been a gruesome mistake by an unknown naval official in Washington. A telegram announcing the death reached the young man's home on a recent night. The message nearly prostrated the mother, still mourning her husband, who died recently. Arrangements were made at once for the funeral. Floral pieces were ordered, and the site of the grave picked. Word of the death spread rapidly. Scores of friends of the family began calling at the house. Then came another telegraph message that the body left Washington at 2:00 in the afternoon and would arrive in Boston the next day. As soon as this was received, Thomas J. McLaughlin, a brother studying for the priesthood in New York, conferred with priests of the Church of the Blessed Sacrament relative to the time of the funeral mass. Notices were sent to the members of Jamaica Plain Council, Knights of Columbus, for a special meeting to take action on the death and plan for attending the services. The brothers of the boy, Undertaker Roach, and several relatives went to the South Station to meet the body. When the train pulled in, a short casket was put off. The brothers thought there must be a mistake, as William is slightly under 6 feet. To make certain, the casket was taken to the undertaking rooms, opened, and there was found a man of over 70. Fearing that his brother was dead and that a wrong body had been shipped, Thomas telephoned to Washington, but was told the corpse of William McLaughlin had been sent and none other. A second call was made to Washington, and this time Thomas talked with William at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. "Well, is this you?" anxiously asked Thomas. "Sure. Why all the excitement?" replied the brother. He was told the story. "Run all the way home and tell Mother and the girls I am in perfect health and expect my discharge in a few days," ordered William. Telegrams were sent to the Navy Department immediately, explaining the error. Hours later, sometime after midnight, a reply was received. Some time ago, William McLaughlin went to St. Elizabeth's Hospital suffering with influenza. He recovered rapidly, but was directed to remain there for his discharge from the service. Meanwhile, 70-year-old William McLaughlin died. His body is again en route to Washington on direction from the authorities there. Hog alive after 6 months in straw pile. Farmers are discussing with considerable interest and merry humor a strange incident that occurred on the farm of Henry Merrill, about 3 miles north of Cutler, Illinois. Last fall, when Mr. Merrill thrashed his wheat, one of his fattening hogs got out of the pen and disappeared. Search was made for it, but no trace of the animal was found. It was quite a mystery, but Merrill was too busy to devote much time to solving it. He was making a straw shed for some of his stock to winter in. However, when the roof fell in before it was finished, he abandoned the idea. In clearing away the straw, recently, imagine his amazement when he beheld a long, thin, skeleton-like hog drag itself from beneath the pile. A closer inspection revealed the undeniable fact that the hungry porker was the one he had lost last fall. The hog was little more than skin and bones, but is already filling out on the selected food that is being given in generous portions. Mr. Merrill is confident that the hog will regain its lost weight rapidly, and he expects will be ripe for slaughtering long before next fall. Farmers in the vicinity are wondering that the hog survived the winter, or that it did not succeed in rooting itself free from the big straw pile. Some are of the opinion that it slept most of the time, hibernating, as it were, like bears or other wild animals do. Anyway, the hog had a warm nest and was never in danger of freezing to death. Wins medal for new variety of corn. Dr. Friedrich S. DeLue, a Boston oculist, has received a medal from the Horticultural Society of Massachusetts for having developed the highest grade of sweet corn, a variety he has named Golden Giant. The award is extraordinary in that the Conservative Massachusetts Society has made no award for corn in the last 67 years. This was because of the minor defects its experts found in all specimens presented. Dr. DeLue's variety is deemed nearest the ideal, both in physical form and in nutritive values. Many years ago, Dr. DeLue became deeply interested in plant life because of its relationship with the life of the ordinary human being. Corn admittedly excels in nutrition, and Dr. DeLue concentrated his efforts on the Native American grain. So, for more than 17 years, he worked towards the ideal corn. His efforts were successful when the Golden Giant was perfected. The new variety is remarkable in that it matures from 2 to 4 weeks earlier than any other sweet corn, is grown with vastly less labor, and has from 16 to 22 rows of fine, healthy, and large kernels. Year after year, it is grown without a single white speck or imperfection. Perfection of crop after crop for the last 3 years is attested by thousands of letters and communications sent to Dr. DeLue from all over the world, even from distant China. The Golden Giant is rich in protein, starches, and sugar, and the experts of the Massachusetts Society praise its nourishing qualities and general characteristics. Tests have been made showing it to be much richer in the nutriment for the human system than any known corn. At several of the government experimental stations and State Farm, it is being tried this year. From his experimental farm at Needham, Massachusetts, Dr. DeLue is sending packages of sample seed to all parts of the world. Wears big shoes. Olaf Alexander, a Virginia soldier, surely must be some man if his shoes are a criterion. Alexander was in a company commanded by Lieutenant Leslie Reinard of Newcastle, Indiana. And Reinard was so impressed with the size of Alexander that he brought a pair of his shoes home with him. The shoes are a size 16 1/2, being made especially for the soldier by the government. Alexander, according to the lieutenant, is 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighs 275 pounds. Poodle adopts 7 jackrabbits. Rachel, a woolly poodle dog belonging to Mrs. Mary Colbert near Fort Worth, Texas, is mothering 7 little jackrabbits and doing the job in a manner which evidently pleases the long-eared tribe. The poodle had recently lost her 5 little children. She was almost wild with grief. Then, all at once, she became her old self again and was frisking about the place in a way which excited the curiosity of her owner. Mrs. Colbert noticed that her pet made frequent trips to a wooded spot several hundred yards from the house. She followed her, and there discovered her fondly caressing the little jackrabbits. Rachel had found the mother rabbit near her home, or at home, and killed her. Then she took charge of the orphans and is bringing them up. Mrs. Colbert says she will allow the poodle to bring the little rabbits home when she cares to, and that she will let them take their place in the yard. End of section 27.
Section 28 of The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. The Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2. Our August 1st number. By Ronald Oliphant, Editor. In the unknown revolution, Denby Brixton has taken for his subject that tremendous problem which lives eternally upon our western borders, Japan and Mexico. Will they realize their dream of conquest and expansion? Japan to gain new territory for her ever-growing millions, Mexico to win back the traditional possession of what was once hers, the vast rich California. That secret intrigues are constantly developing between the two nations, with this end in view, is beyond the shadow of a doubt. Denby Brixton shows the agents of Japan and Mexico actually bringing about what most of us seems inconceivable, the wresting from us of part of our country and the planting there, as a dominating power, those two alien races. But then Uncle Sam slowly but surely takes a hand in the persons of 3 of his ablest representatives of the Secret Service. Pitted against them are the mastermind of Japan's statesmen and the powerful allied factions of Mexico. What ensues forms one of the most thrilling narratives that it has yet been our good fortune to publish. We would tell you more now of this story, but we know that by doing so we would lessen your enjoyment when you read it. Don't miss it. If you do, it will be a loss every real lover of exciting fiction should regret for many a day. Don Mark Lemon, whose story The Whispering from the Ground you will find in the present number, appears again. He is an author widely noted for his mastery of the fantastic, closely plotted short story. In the piece of his work which we shall offer to you, The Spider and the Fly, we believe he has achieved as powerful, as tensely gripping a tale as any that has yet come from his prolific pen. If your hair does not have an unaccustomed crinkle at the extraordinary conclusion of this story, you had better read the ladylike magazines among which we are glad to say the Thrill Book does not include itself. The Crystal Ball, by James Carey Hawes, is a mystery yarn with a denouement so unexpected that you are left breathless with surprise. We bank on this as a sure pop winner, and are convinced that after you have read it you will agree with us. The Kiss of the Silver Flask, by Evangeline Weir, has in it all the elements which constitute a thrill book story. You will find in it just such a piece of fiction as we are ever on the alert to grab out of the scores of humdrum hopefuls that come to us in the mails every day. Don't miss Part 3 of The Opium Ship by H. Bedford Jones. You remember that Part 2 ended with all hands wrecked on Paracel Island. See what happens when the big struggle starts for possession of the dead Arevalo's treasure box. The concluding chapters of The Lost Empire by Francois disclose Godfrey Boone's return to the continent of the Sargasso Sea. Almost too late they come. Boone and Colchurch are plunged into the very perils from which they try to save Marjorie. Their ultimate escape offers you some reading which we guarantee will hold your interest to the last word. Other contributors to this number, with work in every essential up to the past, present, and future standard of the Thrill Book, are Carlton W. Kendall, whose story The Fear depicts an entirely new and different form of that emotion, Gray Laspina's story called The Wax Doll, Clyde Broadwell with the second in his Tales of the Doubleman series, Anna Alice Chapin's powerful mystery story When Dead Lips Speak. There are also the concluding chapters of Traynor Lansing's two-part story The Lost Days, in which is told with scientific exactitude just how the days were lost and what the amazing man was who caused them to be lost to all the country except Manhattan Island. It is the unusual that interests. The Thrill Book is utterly unlike any other magazine. When you finish reading the Thrill Book, pass it on to a friend. End of section 28, and end of the Thrill Book, Volume 2, Number 2.